There's a lot of children in Shiur.
Yeah, it's an amazing organization.
It is phenomenal.
It is a great organization. It needs money, but literally every single person that I know.
It shows how many people you've given to in the past, because they know they can actually back.
Yeah,
It's a compliment. Actually message you on the stage. On the stage, it's phenomenal. Actually physically message you.
Also with a dear friend or just a message?
It shows how many people you've given to in the past, they know they can actually back.
Everyone knows now. Everyone's going to send you the link now. Yeah, what's your number, Ben? 07?
I'm not going to say it. I'll say about 26 and 7 people. Have you done? Private. Not on their sleep. Not.
How many have you given?
I gave one person that every year he's the person that I deal with it. Like he always we had a dinner. He made a table. I was on the table.
Do dinners anymore these people?
I don't need to.
I bought a box of chocolates in soon.
Any comments?
How I've got.
Yeah, get it. Go on. Any more?
Just so there's no one. Just so they don't need dinners anymore.
Why?
A hospital dinner. I'll do this.
People like dinners though. They'll still do it when they can. They'll do it again.
Get rid of this whiskey. Then we gave me a gift. The Guardian's chapter. Oh, nice one.
I've heard of it. Never had it.
It's a limited edition.
Well, have you drank it or you kept it?
No, it's one of those you don't really want to open. It's probably like 90 quid.
Yeah.
It's not on Amazon.
Simple.
Yeah,
it probably isn't for selling. But
no, it's not good enough to sell.
Yeah, but
it's too good for us.
Specific, yeah.
Well, when we finish Pesachim, maybe. Oh. Maybe it's not.
Pesach, you have to get rid of it as well. Which whiskey is that?
What's it called?
Guardian's chapter. Glenlivet. One of those. When we have your pound to pound, the whole shelf.
Told you. If we finish, if I finish that.
And you've not got rid of it.
I bought chocolate. Somebody else said they're bringing whiskey. Oh, you're not allowed. Not allowed chocolate. Oh, whiskey probably.
Always allowed whiskey. It burns all the fat.
No, is that what you take off?
Works for me.
Actually, I was told that alcohol is quite high calories.
Yeah, but not a little shot.
Oh.
Beer, wine's heavy. Beer, whiskey. Unless you drink a lot of it, you can't go.
It's the same heavy, just you drink less.
Huh?
It's the same heavy, just you drink less.
Yeah. Oh, here it is.
Robinson's.
Famous grouse.
A musky, still make a musky.
Stampedale.
Cameron. Wow.
Oh, is that a good one?
Is it gold or red? West is very nice.
What he did was he poured it out and he added apple juice inside. This is apple juice.
I filled it up with some Tesco's.
Where's that one? Too busy texting people about going on.
Yeah.
We're unemployed.
It's not
Wait, no.
finished now, isn't it?
They're way over now. They're still
7
going.
everything.
Yeah, don't worry.
Bonus
round. That's what I'm
Oh, a bonus round.
Bonus round.
They haven't got anyone enough.
I can't stand for this bonus round. You've got your target. Switch it off. Imagine if the taxes were suddenly right. We got what you needed, but we'll go for bonus round. Here you go.
Doesn't look like the English government time soon going to cover all the. It's going to take time. Okay. 30 seconds, just make sure it's 55.
How good do you drink sherry, guys?
Don't know. How's my stomach? The fact that we're drinking so much whiskey these days, drinking more whiskey through that for Yomi than any other time.
That's why we all came. That's why we signed up.
Shabbos is the best.
Now, what's your opinion on sherry? Should we phrase
I don't know.
Do you drink it? Yes.
We can't because it's a dangerous precedent.
Don't even
We
start.
get there's 10 people in this group just being by no.
Okay,
Then there'll be loads.
right.
I'll give you a donation.
Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
wow.
Oh,
Now you've
so
said a
you
nade, I'm
would.
afraid.
Yeah, you would.
Nade.
Right, I mean,
Okay, let's get going. It's 35. It's past 5 to now. Very late.
Get 3 days of boys.
The Mishnah says that the Kohen that's standing next to the Mizbeach would pour the blood. How many times on the Mizbeach did you have to pour the blood? I need once. Very good, Zirk.
No, I got it wrong.
What did you say?
What was I saying? It was wrong.
Wasn't one.
Now, the Mishnah uses the expression, he threw it.
Yes.
Now, there's another way to do blood, is to pour it. No, there's sprinkle, there's pour. Sprinkle is when you take a tiny bit and sprinkle. Dabbing it by chatos. Chatos is the only one when you dab it. Zvika is by certain ones. Here we talk about throwing it. There are only 3 components that we throw the blood, or that we do one matana. That's Pesach, Maisa, and B'choy. Pesach. Now, there's a machlekes. The truth of the matter is, a fascinating thing is the Torah does not say anywhere. The Torah does not write anywhere that you're supposed to do zrika of the dam for Korban Pesach. It doesn't mention it anywhere. The Torah does not say, there's not a single pasuk in the Torah what to do with the blood of Korban Pesach. There's a machlekes tanoim. So how do we know that you need to do it? The Gemara here doesn't mention how machlekes tanoim. The Gemara assumes that you know it, but it's machlekes in Zvachim, where the two drashas, I'll say briefly. One is, it says like this. It says, Dam zvochecho yishofich. The blood of your korbanos you shall pour. Which korbanos are we talking about? We must be talking about Korban Pesach. The other man says, is domom tizvik. Now that pasuk is actually talking about b'choy. Now it says, by the blood of the b'choy, it's blood you should throw. Now the word domom is in plural. Now b'choy is really should be single. So why does it say it in the plural? From there we learned that you're supposed to do zvika of the Korban Pesach as well, from the fact that it's in the plural. Now the nafkemina between whether you learn it from a stomach tizvik or from the fact that it says dam zvochecha yishofech is exactly how you do it. Do you take the blood and throw, or do you just pour it? So our Mishnah, which says that Kodekus Mizbeach is Zoivek Zvika Achas Keneged HaYesod, holds of that drush, not that. That's what the Gemara says, very straightforward. Kodekus Mizbeach B'chol. We're up to 6, 7 lines to the bottom of the Samach Dalam on Beis. Man Tana Pesach Bezvika, who's one who says Pesach Bezvika? Mamchisa Pesach Lili. The Tanya. Basically, Loim is Domam Tizuk Al Mizbeach. There's Chelbam Taktit. Domo Loinema, it doesn't say it in the single Elo Domam. Chelbo Loinema Al Chelbam. Lomad Al B'choy Umayso Pesach Shetunin Matan Domim Ve'imun Gab Mizbeach. That you have to do the blood and the Imun Gab Mizbeach. Rabbi Shmuel doesn't agree with this. And the Gemara in Zvachim actually asks the question. Rabbi Shmuel learns that this pasuk is referring to only B'choy. So why does it say plural? The Gemara answers because there's a few kinds of B'choy. There's B'choy Be'imo Gasa, B'choy Be'imo Daka. There's different kinds of B'choy. So the plural is not referring to various korbanos, it's referring to various B'choyos. So there's 2 ways to understand the pasuk. According to this man, you have to throw the blood. But now from that pasuk, it only says you have to throw the blood. It says nothing about where on the Mizbeach, nalon to turn in your soit, that you need to do your soit. Omar Belozo, says Zvika Me'oilo. It says Zvika Me'oilo. Ksivacha, it says over here, Stomon Tizuk al Mizbeach. Uksivhasa Mezolku B'nana Kenim Estomon al Mizbeach Saviv. Ma'oilo to your soit, Apesach Namon to your soit. It's a Kseva Shova, it says Zvika. Just like by Korban Oilo, it has to be oppositely so it also by the Korban Pesach. I want to say a word for Shechachmo. A very, very interesting word. I must say, give you nightmares. I don't know if give you nightmares, depends what relation. Anyway, if you picture the Mizbeach, imagine there was the Kodesh. The Mizbeach would be over here, and the Kevish would be here. That's how it was. The Yisod went from here all the way around till here. So there was the majority of these 2 walls had no Yesod, and all the rest of it did. So the Yesod went around 2 full sides and a tiny bit, 1 am on each side. If one Zvachim asks what in the world is going on, why would you do such a thing? The main answer the Gemara there gives is because all that belonged to Shevet Binyamin. But Yehuda's inheritance, Nachlas Yehuda, went into the Beis HaMikdash, not into the Kodesh HaKadoshim because that was there, but into the Azor. And it went almost up to the Mizbeach. And we can't have the Yesod in Nachlas Yehuda because it says, being safe of Shochim. You did Hashem Mishkin Levetach, Olav Choyf, Olav Kol HaYoim, that only in the Shevet Binyamin can the Beis HaMikdash dwell. So the Shechachmo asks, we're so being medactic that we can't even have a tiny bit of the Yesod in the area which is Nachlas Yehuda. Why? It brings a Gemara in Kedushin that says, when the person disrespects his parents, what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say? It's good that I didn't dwell amongst this house, because if I were to be there, he would just treat me dishonorably as well. He says in the Shechachma that all the children cause pain to Yaakov Avinu. The brother sold Yosef inadvertently by causing Lashon, etc. The only one that never caused any pain to Yaakov Avinu was Binyamin. How can you have even a tiny bit on the Mizbeach in the Nachla of Yehuda? He caused pain for his father. Hashem doesn't want to be there. So what happened was when you did this week of the Bechor Maisa Pesach Ha'oila, where could you do it? The Gemara says you could only do it these two corners. I don't know if you can see from where you're sitting. Why? Because there had to be two opposite corners. And you couldn't do it this corner and that corner because then you wouldn't have all four walls. So the only two corners were these two. If this is where the Kevish was, that's where the Yisroel was. Okay, it's interesting to have from the Shechach. But nice to the column Pesach, you could do it in three corners because it went across two whole walls and a tiny bit of the next. So there's only one corner that you could never do the Zika of the column Pesach. That was that corner. The other three you could.
There was no, you say then.
That's what I was just saying. That's
You
it.
can't
Do it. That's
because there's no you say you can't do it because it was Nachal Yehuda. There was no you say because that's the end of it.
That's it. That's it. Says how do you know by Oila that you have to do it next to Yisroel? The pasuk there is talking about chatos. The chatos you have to pour the blood on the Yisroel, and it says El Yisroel Mizbach Oila. Am Oila to the Yisroel, and the Rishonim explain that like this. The pasuk says El Yisroel Mizbach Oila, to the Yisroel of the Mizbach Oila. Now the words Mizbach Oila are spare. The reason is, if you got it inside the whole pasuk, because the pasuk says you should take from the blood, put it on the karnos mizbach ha'oila. The Torah did not need to say twice mizbach ha'oila. It could have just said ala mizbech on the same mizbech. The extra time mizbach ha'oila teaches you that the oila itself also required yesod. So all the korbanos required yesod. Mizbach ha'oila teaches us the oila. And from the Oila we do Exer Shava to Bechor Maisa and Pesach. We do it to Pesach. On Pesach we do Ekesh Bechor Maisa. So they all need, according to the Shvicha Achaz, Keneged HaYesod, like we say in Ezra. It's also cast to show the V'chulu. So there were three groups. The last group was the group which they never got to the Pasuk or Hafti. Says the Gemara up to third line of Samachem Udalef Tana. He Nikras Kas Atzlonis. It was called the lazy group. If you were the third group, you were lazy. You had to have three groups. We learned yesterday. Kahal, AW, so you had to have three groups. They should have been mezuzahs themselves. So Rashi says, of course, even though the doors closed on themselves miraculously, but the fact is, if you were the one that you were in the last group, there was obviously something wrong with you. Why were you in the last group? Why were you not in the earlier group? The world needs people that sell perfume, and the world needs people that sell that work on leather. Working on leather in the olden days was considered the most smelly job. Ashri Mishu Nose Besam praises the one that his job is selling perfume. Can't have a world without sons and daughters. Woe to the one that his sons or that he has daughters. Oh, it's a very, very good question. Surprised you noticed it. So I noticed the art school, which again has to be politically correct, says that daughters cause more worry for the parents. But the Gemara doesn't mean that. The Gemara means, because the fact is, your son, you've got the opportunity to teach Torah. I saw in the Sefer, Siyach Chaim, it's called. And he said that he has 9 sons. Can he daven for a daughter? So no, can't daven for a daughter. Because the Gemara says he should daven for sons. So Tali pointed out a very interesting thing, which I must admit the Meiri says, not here. The Meiri is in Bava Basra. A very interesting Meiri, almost like Chassidish Shavuot. You look at the Gemara very carefully, it says, Asher Misha Bonav Zecharim, praises the one whose sons are male. Oilei Misha Bonav Nekevus, woe to the one whose sons are female. How can you have female sons?
Oh, no, you don't.
No, I really don't get it. Says the Meiri, the tachlis of a boy, it's quite a harsh Meiri. A man knows that in life it's not his job to take, it's his job to give. It's his job to mashpia on the family, and the wife is the mekaber. Woe to the one that his sons grow up thinking that they need to take all the time. That's what the Gemara means. Interesting. It's good to say for getting married. So your chassan, that's very good. So next time you have your very good. The Mishnah says that they did the same thing on Shabbos a weekday, except that on Shabbos they would rinse the azor against the wish of the Chacham. The Chacham were not happy with them rinsing it. How would they rinse it? Anybody know? Yeah, almost. They closed the stream. There was a stream flowing through the azor that would block it off, and the water would really sponge up. Says the Gemara, Shlibotzin man, who was the one who protested? We have a principle, there's no Issa D'Rabbanan Beis Hamikdash. And according to the Chachamim, doing sponge on Shabbos is only asked to be D'Rabbanan. And we have a rule, they're allowed to do D'Rabbanan Beis Hamikdash. It must be according to Rabbi Lezer that holds it still, guys. Mahi, the Gemara says what is it? The Tanya, we had this in Shabbos. Echad Achoydav, if you milk. What's the Issa of milking? Dosh, very good. Mechabetz. What's mechabetz? What's the Issa of mechabetz? Mechabetz is that you congeal the milk. Megaben, you make cheese. Oh, Rashi says megaben, making cheese is boina, because you're building the cheese. Mechabetz is a kind of boira, because what happens is you separate the bits that can harden and the bits that can't. Tasting the Rashi asks a shaila, is grating cheese on Shabbos, is it soisa? He says he's never heard of such a thing. Like grating cheese should be soisa. So how can Rashi say that building cheese is boina? So he's asked, okay, what do you say? Oh, that's what I was saying it. I was thinking you're making a building. When you grate it, you're just putting it apart. Okay. Kegurgera is the size of a fig. This is the kasha that we had in Shabbos, that the amount of milk to be imported, to be carrying, is the amount of one sip. So why over here is it even less, the size of a fig? So he says, because once cheese is more valuable than milk, and therefore fig is considered even less. Kamir is like a swallow. Kids, there's many halachas regarding this, making cheese, different about the different isurim. Hamachabed, somebody who sweeps, v'amarabates, and somebody who pours water. In those days, had a lot of dust on the floor, so you'd sprinkle water to make the dust go down. V'avoide chalus tvash, take somebody who takes chalus on Shabbos, b'shoigeg, b'Shabbos chav chatos. Does anybody remember why taking honeycombs out of a honey hive, you get chatos? What's the issa deraisa of it? No, I thought about it because it says by unison. I mean, he took the honey, he took it from the field. Vidalshan, that honey is like a plant that is like a koitza. Okay. So the Ma'isa Blessa holds its deraisa, all these things. It's only D'Rabbanan, and the Gemara there in Shabbos tells us it's only the last things, not the first three things. That means is deraisa, but the last three things, mechabed, mabis, and loida, those are D'Rabbanan. That's the Gemara in Shabbos says. There's 6 things of less as deraisa. The Chachamim agree with the first 3 are not the last thing. Now, it's good to be aware. Sweeping on Shabbos is D'Rabbanan. The answer is no. Only in the olden days, when most floors were earth. So therefore, even in an area which was not earth, you were not allowed to sweep. But nowadays that most floors are hard, are covered, you're allowed to sweep. Are you allowed to sweep your garden? No. Because most gardens are not earth. Right. Most are earth. So what did I say? Earth, very good. Right. And then, but Rashi says, I was surprised, I must admit I don't do it. He says you should have a separate broom for Shabbos. Do you have a separate broom for Shabbos? Separate broom for Shabbos.
Indoor.
For indoors, yeah.
You need a speck scratcher as well for Shabbos pages.
What's a speck scratcher?
Back scratcher. And it's all back scratchers to cover Shabbos pages because you meant to have.
Do you have a separate broom for Shabbos? Rashi says you should. I took that a separate room.
No, you said a few months ago about back scratcher. You can't use your regular one.
To the chol, yes. Nice, so there's a huge machlik. Yeah, but I don't have a separate room for Shabbos. I'm telling you that. I do sweep for Shabbos every week. What? I'm telling you what I do. Well, I should be doing something else. The Beis stab me if you the taste of here. It's big machlik to show you what's the issa. What's the issa of sprinkling of sponge? What's the issa of sponge? So the answer is what? No, no, not squeezing. No. The reason is because you'll come to make the floor straight, and you'll do boina. Because when it comes to water, you need it to be very smooth to work. In fact, if that's the case, Beis Hamikdash, it was completely marble. So who cares? So this answers that between the marble there was like we have what's called grout. So this is because of that. Other Rishonim argue, and it comes out Machlikus Rishonim as to what exactly the Machlikus of Les Nachom is. Some hold that Rabbi Lezer holds is deraisa because a person, even in the Beis Hamikdash, was happy to smooth out the grout, and therefore it wasn't davish miskaven, it was davish miskaven. Actually, the Chum hold it was davish ein miskaven, it wasn't even secretions, therefore it was only drabanan. Kitzes machrikas whether doing sponge on a proper floor, not a earth floor, is deraisa drabanan. Lezer holds is deraisa, Chum holds is drabanan. So therefore, since we hold that in the Beis Hamikdash there's no Durabbanons, so therefore it should be mutter. So the Gemara says we're obviously going Shittas Rabbi Lezer. Ravashi Omar afilu tim shlivos chachamim, even it could be Shittas chachamim. Rav Nosni the time of Nosni shvus tzvicha hetiru Shabbos. Hetiru shvus she'eno tzvicha lo hetiru. They only permitted a Durabbanon which is necessary. This is the Durabbanon which is not necessary. So go machleikas. What is pshat in our Mishnah when the Mishnah says that they watered, they cleaned the Beis Hamikdash against the wish of Chachamim? Either Shittas Rabbi Lezer that holds it's deraisa, and the beginning of deraisa, or Shittas Chachamim that's only Durabbanon. Oh, Durabbanon is allowed in the Beis Hamikdash. The teretz is, but it's a shvus she'eino svicha. Now Yehuda says that at the end of the day, they would take 1 cup of blood from the floor, and they would. Tomorrow I'm going to send out an email with somebody wrote it out, not me, with a detailed cheshbon of how they shechted the Korban Pesach. It's got about 30 links to different videos. I'll send it out. I'll send it to you. You'll put it on the group. And it works out that because we said yesterday 1.2 million sheep. Yeah. How much blood? You saw it?
No, you're saying about the mikvah.
No, this is a different one.
No,
Yeah, but there's a different one. How much blood is 1.2 million sheep going to have? So he spoke to a farmer. I don't know. Somebody worked it all out. No, but you don't need all the blood. You only take the first squirt. Okay, it's got it all there. I'll send it tomorrow. You put on the group, etc. It's got a lot of links. I haven't seen any of the links. I can't link any because. Anyway, but if you can, if you want to, it goes through very. The truth of the matter is, I must admit, I decided to do it. I think. My problem with it is that if it's got all these links, people spend more time looking at the links than the actual cheshbonos. And I have another issue with it, is everything was anyway al pines. So the question is it necessary to work it all out, to set it aside? You must remember, 400,000, they had to shecht 400,000 sheep per hour approximately. That's 40,000 sheep. That's 400,000 sheep. Anybody got a calculator? If you shecht 400,000 sheep in 60 minutes, how many sheep are you shechting in an hour? It's about 8,000. No, yeah, it's about 7,000 sheep a minute. 1,000. Okay, it's all cheshbonos. So Rabbi Yehuda says at the end of it all, you would take a cup of blood from the. How much?
666 a minute.
No, much more.
A minute.
40,000.
By 60 by.
Yeah, 400,000, not 4,000. 400,000. What did I say? 400,000. Is 6,000. Wait a second. 400,000 per minute. Can you imagine? No, per minute.
666.
No, 400,000 an hour. 1.2 million. Okay.
How many watts is that?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. 111 sheep a second. How does it take? Oh, you're a sheikhet. How does it take to sheikh the sheep? 5 seconds? Yes. But then you need to have somebody take the blood. But you have to move across and do it.
Everything has to be ready. 400,000 in 60 minutes. That's right, share by 60.
Okay.
Because you got 60 minutes. That'll be seconds.
Are you talking about hour?
Hour per hour.
Oh, you want to work out the hour?
How many
About
hours?
60. 111 an hour.
Time a second.
A minute. Only 11 a minute.
How many
A minute.
60?
5,000, man.
I just want to read out to you.
Why is that permitted and not just divided
Okay,
by 6?
okay, we'll get completely off the point. It's my fault. I just want to read out to you the words of the Rosh. Somebody showed me this, I must admit. The Rosh writes, you shecht the sheep, you have to check afterwards if it's got a mum. Now that's quite a big process to check if it's got a mum. Oh, Moshe is not here, Moshe no fault. Before, and afterwards you have to check if it's got treifa. And you have to check there's nothing inside it. He said, what happens if you find it's a treifa? So you check another one. What happens if the next one's a treifa? You check another one. Until when? Until it's Pesach, because you can. He says sometimes we'll check up to 100 sheep. The whole afternoon. So this 1.2 million is assuming that every single sheep, everything works. That's right. Best case scenario. So no, so you'd have people outside the course. You'd have people that would sell sheep. What? We'll come to it later. I want to go back to it. You take 1 cup of blood, Tanya. You take 1 cup from the blood of the mixture She'im. If one of the blood, if one of the sheep, all the blood spilled, imagine 1 korban, all the blood spilled. So you've not kept the mitzvah. So if you take 1 cup of blood from the floor, and in the floor there's, let's say, 100,000 liters of blood, you take 1 cup, in 100,000 liters of blood, it's got a tiny, tiny drop of every single korban, right? That's how it goes scientifically. So if you take 1 cup and you throw it to this Mizbeach, what? Then we'll discuss that. Again. Oh, very good. Very good. Are you here to the one which didn't go on? Very good. Says the Gemara, maybe the halacha is that if the blood spilled directly from the animal's neck onto the floor, it doesn't help pick it up from the floor because blood's possible. So therefore, it doesn't help pick it up from the floor. So he said, how do they know that it's spilled directly from the neck to the floor? Maybe it's spilled from the cup to the floor. Maybe it didn't go into a keli. Maybe it went straight from the neck onto the floor. So how do you know? I meant that since I rely on the fact that most of the blood was caught, and only afterwards it spilled. It says when we know Yoda, why did Rabbi assume that it went in the bowl and then it spilled? Why did we assume that the worst case scenario that it spilled directly from the neck? You sure you're here? I think I love here. Yes, Tolly. They don't spill it. Fade the Gemara is an obvious question. If Kohanim always catch the blood, is reason why would any of it spill? Why was the point of Rabbi to pick it up from the floor? Answers more. Agav Zuzasayot of the Mishtapchi. That sometimes it would spill because they would work so fast. They would catch the blood, but then they would send it very fast across. So then it would spill. Fade the Gemara, but I don't have to small boy. We have a principle we learned in Krisis, and we've had it before actually, and it come up again and again. When the animal gets shechted, there's different squirts of blood. There's dama nefesh, which is the first squirt, and afterwards dama tamsis. Dama tamsis literally means blood that oozes out. Blood that oozes out is not good for the mizbeach. And not only is it not good for the mizbeach, if a person drinks it, what happens? No chorus. He only gets a laugh. Only a laugh. Says the Gemara, like it's a dama tamsis is not normal blood. Yehuda dama tamsis is dama al Yahu. Heals dama tamsis is proper blood. The tanya dama tamsis ba'azor it's a lav. Yehuda may be chorus. Yehuda in kaposh in the mechaper that even though you get chorus and it's good blood, but you can't use it for the mizbeach. Shenema kadamu b'nefesh shechaper. And the Gemara explains some mechayim based off the page. Dam shenefesh yotzeboy, blood that causes death. Mechaper dam shenefesh yotzeboy in mechaper. So even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that even though you get chorus and it's proper blood, but you don't have a kapor. So if you pick a cup from the floor, it's going to have lots of blood inside it because what happens is you check the animal after the first blood squirts, and while they're taking the animal to be skinned and all the rest, blood is going to be dripping and dripping and dripping and losing out of it. So that blood goes into the bucket, into the floor. Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda like Levi pointed out, ain't dam mevatel dam. Blood is not mevatel dam. Rabbi Yehuda holds. If you've got min beminay eno bottle, does anybody remember where we came up to it before?
Yeah.
When? We had it in Pesachim.
Yeah.
Better, more exact. Rav holds that 1 drop of chametz is not bottled ever on Pesach because min beminay in a bottle. And that's why I mentioned to you about the people who drink the water before Pesach, they take it all out. Because we choishes Rav for Rabbi Yehuda on Pesach. Anyway, so Rabbi Yehuda Tanya, according to you, that they never did this process of taking a cup of blood. What they used to do is, they would block up the drains of the azor that the blood should accumulate. Bishna, according to Rabbi Yehuda, why did they do that? Why would they block up this drainage? What? So they should take a cup of blood, and that cup of blood should have all the blood more the carbonas. So that's why they blocked up the drainage. Hello, but according to them, what's the purpose? They would walk up to the ankles in blood because there was so much blood on the floor. It's a chatzitza. I saw a brilliant chat from Rabbi Yashiv. It's just interesting and good halachas you should be aware of. The halacha is, and then let's do one more line. Lachu, liquid is not chatzitza. There's a very big machlikas that showed brought down the mechaber in the eternal regarding wet things. For example, if a woman has a wet ink, wet blood, is a chatzitza. The Ramah says it's not a chatzitza because people don't care about wet things. Why don't care about wet things? Because it comes off easily. So you don't even need to take it off because something which you don't care about, you don't need to take off. The Mechaber argues to the Ramah and he says, no, of course it's a chatzitza people care about, but it's not a chatzitza. Why? Because liquid is porous. I think the right word is porous, but basically the idea is that liquid goes through it. So let's say I've got wet ink or mud on my hand. Who cares? So if a lady wants to make a table in a river, says she's got that feet going, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it gets through. Oh, what it gets through? Says the Rashi, I'll go right to the Mechaber, not like the Ramah. Because over here the Gemara says the Kohen would walk with the feet on blood. Now, the foot is the whole part which needs to touch the azor because you don't need the rest to touch the azor. Now, the halacha is that when you don't care about a chatzitza, it's not a chatzitza. If it covers the whole area, then it's a chatzitza even if you don't care. It's quite complicated. It's a nice cheshbon. So Rashi says the pashtus is the whole foot. Whatever needs to go on the floor needs to go on the floor, and that the whole floor is covered in blood. If the whole floor is covered in blood, you've got a chatzitza across the whole body. So what are you saying that you don't care? But the halacha is that you've got a chatzitza. Let's say a woman's covered in something from top to toe, every part of her body, but she doesn't care. What's the din? It is a chatzitza. It is a problem because once it's void, it's the whole thing. So the right from this Gemara, and the reason why it's not a chatzitza is not because you don't care. It's not chatzitza because it gets through. Okay, he says it's a kasha on the Ramah, mitzvah liyashiv. So Gemara says lach. Let things not chatzitza. The Tanya had dam, blood, v'ajoy, ink, v'acholav, and milk, v'advash, and honey. Yeveshim if they're dried and congealed chotzim. Lachim in chotzim. Pray the Gemara because vasim the clothes would get dirty. If the clothes get dirty, it's possible. And this is something which I do not know how they manage to get around it. I asked this. If one Kohen would have his clothes dirty, you'd have to stop working. You've got hundreds of thousands of people all shechting, and you have to, and there's blood everywhere. You've been to shechita. Actually, I've been to shechita, but I've told people you have to wear clothes. No, they have to make sure to be clean. So the Gemara says, what they used to do is they would lift up their clothes, and that way it wouldn't get dirty because the feet would go in blood, but the trousers would lift it up and they wouldn't get dirty. But you're not allowed to lift up your clothes. Again, the Rashi says, he says that you're allowed to lift up your trousers temporarily. But if you're going to be walking around in blood, the only way to do it is to tie it up. And that is really considered the wrong measure. That you can't do. So answers are more like this. When you're walking with the limbs to the ramp, then they walked in blood because it didn't matter. You do not need to be in the Kohen. That even taking the limbs to the ramp was something which a Kohen had to do, and if it's part of the avodah, you couldn't have dirty clothes. And for the Gemara, so when they would walk with the wood, that wasn't avodah. How would they go? The masker, it's to be they would go on platforms. And the Rashi himself says he finds this Gemara very difficult. The way the Gemara comes out the maskana, he says, you're going to have to say that in the Azor, there were lots of bollards, or what would be a better word for it? Lots of stilts, platforms, across everywhere. And what happened was like this. When the Kohen would walk to the ramp, and he said Pashtus was there all year round. And he says he's not seen anywhere else in Shas and Tomid and Midas any mention of these platforms. But they had to be there all year round, he says, because you can't make changes to Beis Hamikdash. That you don't make changes to Beis Hamikdash. They had to have it all the time. So when the Kohen would go to do the avodah, you can't make changes to Beis Hamikdash. Okay, that was within the same measurements. You could change from wood to metal, but you can't change the sizes of the floors. You can't make the floor bigger or smaller. So what happened was like this. When they walked with the wood to the Mizbeach, they walked on the actual floor, got their feet dirty with blood and everything else, and their clothes dirty with blood, because that was a cover for the Beis Hamikdash to show how much they loved the blood of the Korbanos. But when they would then do the Zrikas Hadam, all the avodah, bringing the parts that go on the Mizbeach, they would walk on platforms which had no blood on them, had to be perfectly clean. And that way, and keep the clothes long. That's what he says. That is what the Gemara comes out in the Maskana. It's just very hard to picture how it all worked. How would you skin it? You'd tear it, where it's serious and more of you took out the inner limbs. Nosne b'megis, you put in a bowl haktiron to be makted. The owners would skin it, because they would have to then skin it, and we're going to learn what they did with different parts of the korban. But would they sacrifice it? We just said a minute ago, who would have to sacrifice it? The kohen. So why does it say you tear it, put it in the bowl to sacrifice? Not that he should sacrifice, but that they should be sacrificed. It's a passive verb and it's opposite of passive verb. Passive verb, the Rashi al talks about it very lot. Like it's something which happens by itself, right? By Yushav Moshavan, they were returned. By Yoshev Moshavan, and he returned them. Here, the Mishnah doesn't mean that the one who skinned it sacrificed it. It means that he would skin it, put it in a bowl, that it should be sacrificed, not that he should sacrifice it. Each one would put his Korban Pesach in its skin, would then take it as a bag over his shoulders. Tires like Arab workers. There's quite a lot about this. I'll explain a little bit. After you finish skinning it, they would put the body back into the skin, and then they would sling it over the shoulders to take it home. The reason is a variety of reasons. They would have to take the Korban Pesach home. The halacha is that hekdesh, which you're malim ayin from, which you don't look for 1 second, the halacha is it's no good. Why is it no good? Well, choishes that a dead shell fell on it. So how can they take the Korban Pesach home? The answer is the skin was not mekabel tumah, because the skin is not royal for a keli yet. Your skin is not mekabel tumah until you make it into a shoe, into a proper keli. They put it back into a keli which is not mekabel tumah, and then they could put it over the shoulders, and that's how they could carry it home. I hear it's a very good question. I never thought of it, but I dare say they would stuff it back in and just wrap it around. It wasn't like a proper keli. They were taking the same skin of the sheep, which just a minute ago skinned it, and put it back in. Anyway, there's brought down in the Kafta Rafech and others like this. That he says that this is how the Arabs do it. Rashi says, and then that's what Iddish says. Tayus. Tayus means Arab travelers. We know that Yitzias Mitzrayim was the whole Korban Pesach man is Yitzias Mitzrayim. Why did we go down to Mitzrayim? Because of the fact that we sold Joseph to slavery, the sinas chinam. So therefore, who would once he sold them to Yishmoenim? So we used to take the sheep in the way that Arabs travel to remind ourselves that of it. And that's why we eat karpas. Chul karpas was chelas. What's karpas? It's a fine wool. To remind ourselves that the original jealousy began with the nice coat that Yaakov gave Esau, or Yaakov gave Yosef. It's not working. Lemaisa, because of all of that, it's a memory to the fact. And I tell you, it's important halacha. It happens not regularly, but every so often in my house, I pour the wine for Kiddush, and then one of my children needs to sing to the bathroom or falls off the chair or fights or gets a fight with another one, and I have to stop the Kiddush, and I have to go and sort it out to help the child, etc. The problem is that Yain Megula is not good for Kiddush. And don't tell me that what the people are making for Kiddush were more machnim. Shmuel talks about it. The Gemara talks about it. Shom talks about it. What? Why would it be pogum?
We're saying no, that machmir as well.
Well, machmir gabe pogum, and we're machmir gabe megula. For all you know, a snake might come in and take it. Therefore, what I do is, so I tell all my children, look at the wine while I go out of the room, and keep your eyes on the becher the whole time while I go out of the room, and then I come back in and make Kiddush. Let's pour it in the bottle. I could pour back into the bottle, but I'm usually in a bad mood by then. I've got the patience. What? What do you say? No, it's to get to argument whose chair you're sitting on. They all need to have their own chair. But that's the idea. They would put the meat back into the skin. That's a shaila who Kochim Kalim is machrikas for this kind, but they could always give it back afterwards. So they'll take it. Had noch Tom Nishchat, and noch Tom Nishchat, and noch Tom Nishchat, and it's many more times. This will next one better and better, and lost the double. I prefer to do a bit of the Mishnah, but what do you think? I think so. Now, the halacha is very, very briefly that you bring the Korban Pesach even on Shabbos, but only that which you have to do on Shabbos to do on Shabbos. Whatever you don't need to do on Shabbos, you can't. So, for example, can you roast on Shabbos? No. Oh, there's big machlokes Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua. What about machshirei mitzvah that you could have done before Shabbos? For example, bringing the Korban Pesach from out of town, or cutting off a wart, and all these things which you could have done before Shabbos. According to Rabbi Lezer, you're allowed to. According to Rabbi Yeshua, you're not allowed to. Does anybody remember where else they argue about this? Very good. Oh, in fact, the Rishonim all say that this Rabbi Lezer is not even accurate, because Rabbi Lezer talks about doing the Rabbanons before Shabbos. But really, his shitta is even allowed to do Raisas, like we learned to bless the Mira. Only what they're saying is Rabbi Lezer was arguing with Rabbi Yeshua, the shittas Rabbi Yeshua. We'll come to it. It's a very important point. The Rabbi Lezer was allowed to do a certain Raisa. If you remember the Gemara on Shabbos, the Gemara says you're allowed to cut down the wood, to make a fire, to melt the metal, to make a thin bris milah knife in order to do bris milah on Shabbos, all on Shabbos. And we pass no. Anything that you could have done before Shabbos, you have to do before Shabbos. If you forget to bring the knife before Shabbos, you can't do bris milah. You have to wait till Sunday. Anyone Pesach durch Shabbos, this is what durch Shabbos, shchitose, shechtit. With Zrikas Domoy sprinkling the blood. Tessa gets very upset about the Zrikas Domoy. He says there's no issa to sprinkle blood on Shabbos. So why does the Mishnah even mention it? Tessa says that the Mishnah was mentioned, by the way. Now, there's two stages. Every animal has intestines. The intestines are full of excrement. There are two stages. First, you squeeze out. It's like a pipe, like a straw. You squeeze it out, and excrement comes out. And then you rinse it through. The squeezing out we did on Shabbos. The rinsing we do not. Anybody want to guess why? No, not mamish. Because if you don't squeeze out the excrement, the whole thing will go bad and moldy. You won't be able to eat it. The rinsing will not ruin the korban. So michui korban you're allowed to. Lactose, chalavov, and sacrificing the fats, because that's part of the mitzvah. Avod tzviyose, the roasting it. Vadochas krovov, that's the rinsing it out in odechnes Shabbos. Halkavoso ivavoso b'chutz l'tchum, carrying it and bringing it from outside the tchum. V'chatichas yabelta, and cutting off the wart in odechnes Shabbos. Blezo imer doichin, omar blesa. Well, I didn't know. I'll prove it to you. Ma'im shchita, if what is shchita, which is doishim mishum alocha, which is the issa doiraisa doiches Shabbos. Elu shein mishum shvus. Cutting off the wart and carrying the animal, of course, it's only drabbanon. Why is it only drabbanon to cut off a wart? It's koizes. So Shlomo say we're talking about biting it off or using it in a way which is a shinu. Why is carrying it only drabbanon? Are you carrying which is deraisa? Chaynu says that's it's only drabbanon. So says Rabbi Lezer, if carrying it, which is only drabbanon, carrying is only drabbanon. If I'm allowed to shecht it, which is deraisa, kavachim I'm allowed to cut, which is only drabbanon. You're allowed to cook on Yom Tov. If you, for example, want to do an Issa Rabbanon on Yom Tov for no reason, are you allowed to do it? No. Are you allowed to cook on Yom Tov? Yes. So you can see that sometimes the rice says mutter and Rabbanon is forbidden. What kind of proof are you, Yeshua, telling me? I was proving from a mitzvah. If already the mitzvah of Pesach is derech rice, it's kavachim is derech rabbanon, and you're comparing to me on Yom Tov, cooking on Yom Tov, which is a rishus to do it rabbanon for no reason. That's rishus. It's not a mitzvah. I'm talking about mitzvahs. So hey, Rabbi Akiva replied to him, I'll prove to you from Hazor. Let's say somebody was Tmei Meis. Tmei Meis, that means he had been to Levaya, touched a dead body. So he's not allowed to be called on Pesach until he becomes taught. He came out the seventh day is El Pesach, and that day is a Shabbos. Can he sprinkle himself in order to come to, in order to come on Pesach? What would you say? Oh, you're very good. It's because of Tikkun Mona, and the Gemara on Shabbos also says because of Chashashim Yavirenu, you might carry the water. But the question over here is, are you allowed to on Shabbos? So Nachlik Rabbi Lezer and Yeshua. Couldn't Rabbi Lezer, it's the same as Khan. Couldn't Yeshua, it's awesome. It says Rabbi Akiva, I'll prove it to you, which is very hard to understand how you can prove from something which Rabbi Lezer doesn't even agree. Okay, we'll see. Rabbi Akiva says to Rabbi Lezer, I'll prove it to you. If already you're not allowed to sprinkle to make yourself toy. We're not about sprinkling the blood of you, we're about sprinkling par aduma water. If you're not allowed to sprinkle, let's say again, it's a mitzvah to make yourself toy to eat Korban Pesach. Wie mishum shvus etzenu d'rabbanon v'derech Shabbos. Afato atam aleinu shachar b'shem mishum mitzvah. Even though it's a mitzvah, and mishum shvus etzenu d'rabbanon v'derech Shabbos. Omer Rabbi Lezer, v'olei anidon. On that itself, I argue with you. According to Rabbi Lezer, you can sprinkle yourself even on Shabbos. Why? Because he holds that also the preparations for Pesach is also. Why couldn't Rabbi Akiva is also? Because you could have done it before Shabbos. Why did you wait till Shabbos? You should have done it a week earlier. I want to actually finish the Mishnah. We're top of Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara actually later says as a shtech to Rabbi Lezer decided to answer him back like this. Maybe say the other way around. If you're going to say like you, I'll come up with another logic. I hold you not allowed to sprinkle. So therefore, not to Shabbos. Shchita which is melacha. If you're not allowed to sprinkle on Shabbos, and therefore will come out that you can't become Pesach on Shabbos, and we'll get rid of the whole parak we learned last time about Shchita on Shabbos. You get rid of what the Torah says, bring me a fixed time to these, meaning a fixed time that you have to do it that day, meaning Shchita, you have to do that Pesach, so therefore it's Derech Shabbos. But everything else, cutting off the wards, bringing it from outside Yerushalayim, or sprinkling yourself to become Torah, there's no fixed time. So therefore, you can do it before Shabbos. Kalom Rav Akiva, Shabbos, Eino Derech Shabbos, Shchita, Sheyesh Shabbos, Shabbos, Derech Shabbos, it is Derech Shabbos. Rabbi Lezer got very annoyed with Rabbi Akiva. If you remember, who was the rabbis of Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Lezer and Yisroel. So he was very, very upset with him, and he said to him after saying this, you will die from Shechita. And indeed, the Romans actually eventually killed him. What? He was on the Sogam Malchus. But they had back very vehement argument as to whether Isur D'Rabbanan and as Toli put it in Isur D'Oraisa in preparation for the common Pesach is Derech Shabbos or not. Shittas Rabbi Shon, that's how we pass, but it's not. Shittas Rabbi Lezer, it is. So therefore, you had to do everything before Shabbos. All the preparations you had to do before Shabbos, cutting off the wards, bringing it from outside, etc., etc. So, Mazel Tov, and Mazel Tov, Ian.
Mazel Tov,
Good. That's how are you doing? You okay?
yeah, I literally just came in. Yeah, welcome.
You come here from the Chaim.
Oh.
Yeah. I think